I'm Jeff Cook,
And I'm TJ Wilson.
and this is Around the Circle.
I'm walking slowly, I'm taking my time. All I could talking is starting to rhyme. I'm letting go of lonely, letting go of strife. I just can't get enough of this beautiful life.
The Enneagram is a map of the human personality. It's a tool for navigating relationships, creates language for what motivates us, and helps us look at the way we look at everything else. Most importantly, the Enneagram's a mirror because sometimes you need help seeing yourself. My name's Jeff Cook. I'm a philosopher in Greeley, Colorado, and with me is TJ Wilson, businessman, lover of theology, and Enneagram ninja.
Hello.
My man,
Hey.
since it's a tool for navigating relationships, we might employ that tool in, say, a series on relationships.
Hey, what an idea.
We've been talking relationships a lot over the past year, but this is the topic today that I've really wanted to talk about. It's just been in my back pocket consistently.
Yeah, you've been bringing this one up for a long time.
I think it's because this was one of the first things I learned about the Enneagram that blew my mind.
Sure.
and it just hasn't found its spot in the lineup until now.
Well, it's also it's mind blowing, but it's not super applicable to you.
True. We're talking about relationships. We're going to put special emphasis today on romantic relationships, though this isn't exclusive. But I like the angle of romantic relationships here. And who doesn't like talking about romance?
Lots of people don't like it, but
That's
we're
it. That
going
would-
to pretend like they're not listening today.
Well, it would also include me, which I've said in the past. Prudish one that I am. C.S. Lewis notes that where friendship is a shoulder-to-shoulder relationship, we're going somewhere. Romance is a face-to-face relationship that lovers are concerned with one another, whereas friends often are concerned with some activity, something they share. Romantic partners share one another, and that's how they connect. We're going to be talking about relationships on the lines today. So each of the types have a stress and a security number. Many of you will know this. If you want an intro into this, we did a huge series on it at the beginning of 2023, just called Stress and Security. So if you're unfamiliar, I highly recommend you go there. But for our purposes here, many of us have relationships with people who are the type of our stress number or who are the type of our security number. And it's the dynamics between us are affected because of that. And one of the things that TJ and I have talked about frequently, especially because TJ is in a marriage with someone who is on a line with him, is the dynamics in relationships, specifically in romantic relationships, of sharing a line. And how does that affect you? And how does that affect the relationship itself? And I find this deeply fascinating. And so that's where we're going. What you got by way of intro here?
Yeah, I think we are going to sort of put an emphasis on the romantic side of this, but I think a lot of this also applies to people that you're really close to. This isn't necessarily like the coworker that you only see once or twice a week, but like if you're really close with your sibling, then you talk to them every day, and or you have like a best friend that you live with, and like you make decisions together, but you're not necessarily like involved. I think this is good wisdom for all intentional, really close partnerships, even though we are going to be emphasizing the romantic side of it.
That's a good word. We spoke about this in our Zoom meeting with the people who we meet with once a month last night. And as you were just saying, it was the people that came up most in the conversation were either romantic partners or siblings.
Yeah.
And that intimacy is worth naming, and the dynamics are at hand.
Yep.
So as an entry point here, I remember very early on when I just heard about Enneagram, getting into it, and I asked you a question about stress and security, and you were, as a 9, talking about your wife who's a 6, And in that move, you were talking about going to 6 and how important she was in your life, because in the move to 6, when you spoke about going there, you noted that Joni is incredibly helpful because she lives there.
Right.
And that really has just stuck with me since. It's like, oh yeah, people who are healthy in your stress number, they live there and know how to swim in those waters.
Right.
So when you go there kind of awkwardly, stumbling, bumbling, things are breaking, now you're in your stress number, that person can be incredibly helpful.
Right. It's like my wife and I went to Mexico for our honeymoon, and we didn't really, leave the 4-block radius of the hotel that we stayed at because we didn't know where we were, and we didn't speak the language very well, and we didn't know what we were doing, and also we didn't really want to go out anywhere. But when you went to Spain all those years ago, you saw a bunch of stuff because you had family there, and you connected with people who just lived there, and they knew where to take you and show you around, and this is the things to avoid, and here's how you navigate these streets, and blah blah blah. Like it's like when you have to go somewhere, it's nice to have someone who lives there to show you around.
On the flip side, I want to say in middle school, early high school, the first couple girls that I pursued or even dated were 7s. There's something attractive to me about this person.
Sure.
And they represent my security number. And it's almost like I want to be united with, somebody who has that kind of energy. Mm-hmm. And that would be the flip side of this, is that sometimes we move into relationships where that person lives in our stress number. But other times, the person is in our security number, and that experience also ought to be named. What's going on there in terms of the people in our life who, live in security space.
Right.
So that's where we're going today.
Great.
Do you have thoughts on the security move? I noted I don't know how to necessarily talk about this just yet, and so I'm excited for this conversation. But I'm a 1. My security number is 7. 7s pull people into adventure. So I think in my mind, I think that all of our security numbers, the person is pulling you into security. But that may not be the case, I assume, because not all types pull.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily the case at all, especially when we're talking about types that move to a withdrawn number in their security move. I think it depends a lot on what that movement actually looks like. I think for you, moving into adventure is an accurate way to describe that. For me, 9s moving into 3 in our security type, they're like people pull me into a sense of like performing and doing the things that need to get done and excellence. It's really easy for me to not care about doing things, and there's a sense of excellence that comes out of doing things well, and so for us, I think that's not an inaccurate description, but I think there are a lot of types out there that are moving into places where they actually need to slow down.
This will be a big part, I think, of our conversation as well, is a lot of the dynamics are going to be highly influenced by stance. Mm-hmm. And the stance of your partner, the stance of the people who are closest to you really have an effect on you when you go into stress, when you go into security. So
yep,
that's where we're at. In order to get into this, we're going to start with the body triad. What we'll do is talk about 8s. Now, 8's stress move is to 5, so we'll talk about the relationships between 8s and 5s. We'll talk about the stress move of 9s. 9 stress move is to 6, so we'll talk about the relationship between 9s and 6. And 1's stress move is to 4, so we'll talk about that pairing as well. In the midst of this, we'll also obviously be talking about 5s, 6s, and 4s. So their inner life, how they're moving into security. And so that's going to be this podcast. Just be structured around the body types. But really, we're hitting 6 of the 9 types today, and then we'll probably make this a 3-part series and hit all 3 centers over time. So 8's moving to 5. in our monthly meeting last night, had 4 people who identified either as a 5 or an 8. 3 of them were married to one of these types. So we had 2 5s who were married to 8s, 1 8 who was married to a 5. And so 3 out of 4. And so this is a really common pairing, apparently. And I think as we talk through it, you will see why. So it's worth naming and jumping into the things that are different. These are very different types and yet complementary.
Yeah.
The thing that I'm going to start with what they share, and perhaps you can build on this, but both 5s and 8s are going to expect rejection in relationships. Both 5s and 8s are going to connect through offering what they have, either protection or, advisement, knowledge. Both types seem to really enjoy a good debate, like getting into those spaces. Both types seem to really be aware of boundaries and dislike intrusion. Both types seem to need some personal space, and they both can take a stoic posture toward the world. And especially in the 8s moving towards 5 space, you'll see them both having being more nihilistic at times, and they're both, when wanting to assault others, they can both understand and target others' vulnerabilities.
Yeah,
and those are some commonalities. Breaking. Do you have any thoughts on the commonalities there?
Yeah, I think there's a sort of through line of there's a lot of, whether intentional or not, there's a lot of sacrificing feelings to the altar of logic. And I don't know that that's necessarily always accurate, but I think a lot of 5s and 8s will describe the way that they think they behave as putting irrational feelings aside when rational logic disagrees. They think that they are doing the most logical thing all the time.
Right. One of the things that will become very obvious here is like the relationships to feelings comes out of the fact that neither one of them are in the heart center.
Right.
And so you're going to have 5s who are going to be more intellectually dominant, 8s more body intuitionally dominant. And so how do you relate to your feelings? Exactly right. Mm-hmm. On the opposite side, you're going to see 5s who will have a tendency to step away from others, whereas 8s have a tendency when entering a room to fill the space with their presence.
Yeah.
There's the move for 5s to retreat into their imagination, whereas 8s have a tendency to really engage and physically experience the world.
Yeah. And even to the point that, like, in my experience working with a lot of 8s, it's they can't use their imagination to envision something different from the way that they already see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They have to experience it physically in order for it to become real to them.
Yeah, I love that. On that front, there's a lot of preparation that happens in the mind of a 5 before acting, and that's not how things work with 8s.
Absolutely
8s are going.
Yeah, whatever preparation has already taken place.
Yeah. The 5 is ready, aim again, maybe aim a third time, and the 8 comes with the assault rifle, and we're firing.
What are we waiting for? Let's go.
Yeah. There is I think that they're both want to have strength, like a conquest, but 5s want the mental conquest, and the 8s want the physical, somatic conquest. That can be psychological. That can be like this intuitive domination. But 5s want to be strong in their mind.
Yeah, and there's a sense of fullness on both sides. It's the fullness of the intensity with 8s, and it's the fullness of totality with the 5s. They want the completeness. They want all of the information. They want to see the full picture, and I think that, like, leaning on that idea of fullness, the completeness, totality for both types will help understand that a little bit.
Yep. That big picture comes into play with fives really being aware of future threats. They need to shore up the resources to meet those, whereas eights will be much more aware of here's what the physical threat is. What is it that might thwart my will in the moment?
But still a pretty decisive emphasis on future, looking toward what's coming down the pipeline.
This is, I suppose, worth naming here because they both do have that anchor in the future. Fives are taking in the world through the future, through their head. Eights are, through their stance, their future problem solvers.
Right.
But the eight is aware, is it not the case that eight is aware of the power dynamics in the moment, and if things are not going well, I need to skip to next Tuesday to figure out how to win in that space, and then I will retake control.
Well, I think it comes back to that, like, ready, aim versus ready, fire. It's like the five wants to prepare for the possibilities of the future. The eight is already doing the work to get through those possible futures. But there's still, it's like you said, it's taking in the world. Five is scanning what might be coming and sort of stepping back and making a plan for what might be coming. And the eight is just leaning into it, just diving head first and going for whatever things they think are on the horizon.
I suppose cutting, like how you're engaging the future may come back to just those primary motives of the five wanting security and the eight wanting control.
Yep.
And then that's going to be a big thing. They may both be focused on the future, but for very different reasons. Mm-hmm. Speaking then about romantic couples of this sort, this isn't binding, and I haven't done the study, but like just wanted to throw out a couple of names that strike me in pop culture as here might be what this looks like, right? If you got a chance to see the fantastic Sherlock series on the BBC, the relationship between Sherlock Holmes and Irene Adler would be a great example of this. We've typed Sherlock consistently as a five, but Irene Adler in that show is a dominatrix.
Yeah.
You know, and the incontrolledness of that personality in all things voracious, dare we say lustful sexual expression into the world, filling the space. There's one scene where he walks into a room and she's naked, and he can't figure her out because she is essentially overpowering the space that he's used to possessing. I don't know, have you seen this show?
Yeah, and she also is like the fact of being naked. She knows that she's taking his power, and not because of the sexuality of it, but because she knows that this is part of how he reads people.
Yep.
And she's stealing that power from him.
Yep.
Yeah. Because she needs to be in control.
She hacks his phone and places like a very dare we say like an orgasmic sound as his text alert.
Yeah.
Like there's ownership there. And it's of a very, I mean, that's not necessarily crass, but
it is designed to make other people uncomfortable. It's designed to make him uncomfortable.
Right.
And in that way, she still has power over him.
I think that's a great, example of the dynamics here of the romance. And you can see the withdrawnness of Sherlock, the assertiveness of Adler, and how that may play out.
And the full acknowledgement on both parties that there is a very intense and very serious connection between them, but neither of them is prepared to embrace the reality of the emotional impact that relationship would have on their lives.
Yep.
So they are sacrificing their own feelings for the sake of the things that they are doing.
Yeah, exactly right. That creates a lot of the tension in the episode that they're part of. It's good. Only other ones that kind of came to mind, this is secondary. It's your favorite romantic couple, one Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso from Rogue One and Star Wars. Strike me as a 5 and an 8. But to speak to siblings,
talk about it. It makes me so mad.
when we did The Godfather, if we talk about siblings, we typed Michael Corleone as a 5 and Sonny Corleone as an 8.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some of that dynamic that's just great. There's a rich relationship there. But as you were saying, the feelings of that relationship, there's just there are brief experiences of that in the film.
Mm-hmm.
The only other ones I had was there. If you get into, I bring up Warren Buffett all the time, but his partner in crime is a man named Charlie Munger. If you ever see them, they're like two 90-year-olds who have an annual stockholder meeting, and like 50,000 people show up to watch these 90-year-olds answer business questions.
Sure.
And that dynamic, they strike me as brothers as well. It's a worthy potential real world example. But in relationship, though, we have talked about withdrawn types and aggressive types being more of a yin-yang, that's the immovable object and the irresistible force.
Yeah.
And that dynamic will be at play in a romantic relationship between 5s and 8s.
Yeah, absolutely.
It seems to me on the positive side, before we get into what the two can learn from each other, this sort of relationship, I think, really requires investment. But once the investment is there, 5s and 8s, when they partner up, are a formidable pair. Like if they're on the same page and united, if the 8 is meeting the needs of the 5 is committed, persistent loyalty to the 8, that combination, this can be a very strong pairing in my mind.
Yeah. And I think they can also navigate when these two have built a foundation. They can also navigate some of the trickier parts of their relationship in really fascinating ways. Simply because they represent some of the things that the other need so severely, like the ability to recognize that they are both sort of secretive and they're not really forthcoming with the things that are going on inside their head or especially what is happening in their feeling center, and like establishing the need for security and safety and control. They are both sort of relatively similarly concerned about a lot of these things, and they provide that for each other, and even when they are at odds in what they're trying to navigate, they can have the kinds of fights that they need to have without much trouble. An 8 and a 2 are going to fight very differently from an 8 and a 5, an 8 and a 4 or a 9, which is the only combination that people don't recommend, but the ways that 8s and 5s sort of communicate their fights can often be like really, really good for each other, because they can just get down to the facts and skip a lot of those silly emotions that the rest of us bring to the table.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we went through that list of how the two types are different. And what we'll notice is that when the 8 moves to 5, that 5 list is going to all of a sudden emerge.
Yep.
This is why here would be the big idea for us. If you have a healthy person who is in your stress number, this can be a treasure, because they can show you the best ways, to elevate that type's strengths, navigate the world. And so notice this with 8s. 8s going into stress will move out of their body and much more into their head, refocusing on preparation, refocusing on how do I think about the problems that I'm having. Because if an 8 goes to 5 space, that means they're not able to have control in the spaces that they want control.
Right.
That's why they're stressed out. Something has broken. They lack agency. And so the move to stress means I can't physically do it anymore. If I could have physically done it, I wouldn't be stressed out.
Right.
So what do you do when you can't physically do it? I'm going to withdraw into a space where I get my head around the problems that my physical body is experiencing. And notice if you have a 5 in your life who lives there in that withdrawn mental space, that observational space, that could be just a huge treasure of the 5 saying, this is how you think through these things, kid, and re-engage.
Mm-hmm. And also the non-attached space, the big picture kind of space, so much of what an 8 can get from that 5 space, from and just seeing someone else model it and talk through it and be present to it in a way that's non-threatening. Like 5s can say, okay, so here's the problem that you're facing, and here are a list of different possibilities that you couldn't have considered before because you were so attached to your one way. Your one way isn't working, and let me show you the list of other options. And you could pick whichever you want because I don't care, and we can solve this problem together.
Quite right. A lot of times, to build on that, 8s end up moving into stress when their relationships break. And oftentimes, the relationships that break for 8s is they don't understand their effect on other people, as we said. The thing about 5s is 5s are able to think about their emotions. And sometimes that's a thing that 8s lack. 8s are feeling repressed and have a very difficult time seeing their own emotional life outside of their anger.
Right.
But 5s can see their own emotional life.
Right.
And they may not reveal their own emotional life, but they can see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's like 8s will often be feeling very big emotions, but not really having good thinking around it. So they're like, because they are repressed in that feeling space, they don't really know how to deal with a lot of those emotions that they are experiencing. And a lot of 8s will report that they feel all feelings as anger first. And they have to go through the process of discerning what those feelings are in order to understand what's actually happening. And that's kind of where, that's one of the places where 5s live. Is just thinking about the things and categorizing it.
Having that be a net you fall into in stress for the 8 can be real helpful. If I'm entering a space, it may feel uncomfortable, but if you can get used to it, build up those muscles, balance yourself as we talk about with stress and security, getting a sense of your inner life and seeing your inner life can be incredibly important. And also in 5 space, you can see your effect on other people.
Right.
And that's another very valuable thing that 8s can pick up in 5 space.
Right. I think that both 5s and 8s are types that are more comfortable being alone than a lot of other types. Neither of them have a direct center in that feeling space, and they're just they're comfortable on their own. They get more stuff done on their own, and I think that relationship between a 5 and an 8 provides some of that connection that neither of them necessarily admit that they need, but is sort of a stepping stone teaching them how to do relationships well with other types.
Right. Yep. It's a good word. Last thing on my list is that where 8s can lustfully, blow through all of their resources, can have that more voracious appetite for the intense experience. 5s will hoard.
Right.
And that can be really valuable if you have wasted your resources, as it were, as an 8, and you find yourself in stress and just the habit of saying, you know what, I need to do a better job of stockpiling.
Right. And not even necessarily, I think of that also in terms of of not necessarily like financial or material resources, but also the other things that like eights being a little too willing to give away their time and their energy to things that are not serving them, or you might even say are not good uses of their resources. Fives, like that presence of the five in their life saying, oh no, we're not going to that event because we don't have we need to save that for something more important.
Yep. Yeah. We're going to hear that same language when we talk about threes and nines, because threes are going to make the same move. They're an aggressive type, but in stress, they withdraw into nine space.
Right.
Similar move here for the nine,
Right.
or for the eight. On the flip side, then, one of the things that eights really offer to fives is pulling them out of some of these spaces, pulling them out of their imagination, for example. And again, I don't know if the word pulling is right, but certainly the invitation to get into your body is something that an eight may emphasize to a withdrawn five. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that like this is one of the things that eights pretty much do with everyone in their lives is get up and do the thing. They're big pullers. And I think that's a big part of what eights bring to the table in most of their relationships, but especially when thinking about fives moving into security, they see the example of the eight in front of them and say, okay, it's not just about planning, it's actually about doing all of the things. And not only that, but man, if I can just attach my rope, if it were to this person who's constantly going, then even if I nap while being pulled along every once in a while, I'll still get a lot more done. Like there's a well of energy available from the eight that is just unmatched.
Yeah. So where fives are aiming all the time, the eight is saying, pull the trigger. It's go time. Fives are one of those types that they have some very tricky ways of getting into the present. If you were to look at the Enneagram map, they just don't have much of an anchor in the present. But this is one of them. This is one of the places where they can, if they push into their security space or engage their security space, it's an invitation to be physically present and to do things.
And with an emphasis on the future that they're already sort of looking toward anyway.
Yeah. I suppose it may be kind of boring at some level, but this is commonly the case with fours, fives, and nines, that in terms of elevating your repressed center means getting into your body. And that's just going to be the constant refrain for all three of these types is, what does it look like for you to engage your body?
Right.
This, by the way, just as special emphasis, say it is the case that you fall into your stress number. You're in your stress number. One of the best things you can do is not focus on getting secure again, but just in getting centered. So for eights who are in stress, don't try to employ and engage your tools at 2. Really moving out of stress for an 8 just means getting back into your body again.
Right.
And that's what you're getting your mind around things so that you can re-engage your physicality. Anything else on this couple?
I think we did talk a lot about the 5's sort of example of understanding that feeling space. But I think a 5 and an 8 together, it could potentially be very easy for their relationship to become almost void of their emotional investment. I think both types could see focusing on the material world being the thing that sort of carries them through, and then 20 years later they find that they haven't really talked about anything going on deeper than that in 20 years, and now they have no connection anymore except their history. And I think there's a really serious there is space for this pair to lose connection by not allowing their emotional centers to develop together.
Yeah. This is where I'm saying any pairing of types has what we might call kind of a predictable way that they're probably going to fail if they fail.
Right.
The fantastic folks at the Enneagram Institute have put together whatever it is, 54 pages of how each of the types relate to the other types. So 8s and 5s, 1s and 1s, 9s and 6s, etc. And they start with real optimistic, like this is what they bring to the relationship. This is how they're complementary. If things are going to work, this is what it looks like. And then they just do the slow descent.
Yeah.
And it's like, if things break, it's probably going to look like this.
Right. Right.
And that's unavoidable.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. That's it. That's exactly what it looks like. I suppose one last word on this, which I forgot to mention. So on the Enneagram Institute, if you just put into the Google machine, if you just put Enneagram 3 and 8, let's say, whatever whatever relationship you're in, you want to know the dynamics between you and this other person. Just put in Enneagram 1 and 2 or 4 and 7, whatever the numbers are. If you know your type and their type, and what almost always pops up first is the Enneagram Institute page detailing the relationship between those two.
Sure.
Incredibly helpful resource.
Yeah.
And it can be very easy to find. So just in case you're like, I'm not a 5 or an 8, I'm kind of bored by this podcast, you should try this out. It's really great.
Right. Right.
But speaking of another pair, let's bring up your pair. We're moving to the 9s. The 9's stress move is to 6, and lots to say about this pair as well. 5s and 8s, real common pairing. 6s and 9s, maybe one of the most common of all the romantic pairings out there. This is again, common pairing.
Right.
And we'll see why.
I don't know about most common, but I've certainly met a handful of them.
Both 6s and 9s attached to those who provide what they need. They're both space creators. 9s want to create calm. 6s want to create safety for the people they care about. Both seem to be, and this I think is one of the main reasons they connect, is they both seem averse to too much change too quickly.
Yeah.
Both can find it difficult to say what's on their mind, but that can create both calm and peace over the long term, but it also means that there might be some unstated issues. One commentator said that both 6s and 9s disappear in their social role. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's good.
The reason I think that matters is that when the 6 and 9 return home and talk about how things are going, they understand one another, feeling at times invisible out there. Mm-hmm. But together they understand each other and perhaps even see each other.
Yeah.
And I imagine that would be valuable.
Yeah.
6s and 9s seem to avoid the anger of other people. And I think there's like an unspoken, at times, desire of both these types to have their voice honored at the table. And so again, when they retreat, 6s and 9s honor each other's voices. But in their social spaces, 6s and 9s, I think, have a harder time gaining the attention of the room.
Right. Yeah, there's Suzanne talks about this a lot, especially Suzanne Stabile talks about this a lot, especially recently, over the last few years. The idea that like it culturally, socially, world events wise, humanity is at a point right now where we need 9s who see both sides of every argument and 6s who have the common good in mind more thoroughly than any other type. We need to hear their voices now, and we need them to speak up. Humanity needs 6s and 9s to speak up because we're the ones who actually can bridge some of the gaps that are so heinous and creating so many problems for all of us. And this is getting right to the heart of what you're talking about, that The idea that we 6s and 9s don't want to insert ourselves into those places, don't want to be the one who says, "Oh, I know what to do in this conflict." It's almost like we need to be dragged into the arena before we'll start joining the fight.
Yep. I think it was the Enneagram Institute page that essentially said that 6s and 9s can often find themselves living together on the edges. And that's a great opposite image of that. You have to be dragged into the middle. Well, the differences here are really important to note as well. The 6s have more of an agitated energy at times, where 9s obviously have that easygoing energy.
Yeah.
And that can be complementary, but it's worth naming. Yeah. 6s are going to commonly magnify problems that they observe, whereas 9s are going to ignore the problems or downplay the problems.
Right. It's flipping over a magnifying glass.
6s will voice their concerns. 9s, I don't know that it's always known of 9s, but in my experience, there's much more of a close to the vest hiding of concerns for the most part.
Yeah.
Just center wise, 6s are motivated by security, want predictability. 9s want stability.
Yeah.
9s want to be in control and autonomous. To go to the time orientation, it's 6s are going to be focused on the future and what can we do now to alleviate, future concerns. 9s are focused almost exclusively with present concerns. Yeah. If things are not going well in the present moment, we probably don't need to worry about it too much.
Say that again. That didn't make any sense.
Present threats are what 9s care about most. Future threats are what 6s care about most.
Yeah. But I don't think 9s even care that much about present threats. Because we're resistant to the present.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that would be it.
Yeah.
If somebody is encroaching your space in sense of stability.
Yeah, but even that, we'll just take it for a while before it until it becomes a real problem.
Yeah.
So I think a better way to sort of characterize what you're trying to get at is that 6s are going to be focused and vocal and sort of zeroing in on the future threats and the possibilities of things that might go wrong in front of them. And 9s aren't even paying enough attention to what's happening now, let alone thinking about what might come.
Right. Maybe threats isn't the right word. Is disconnection a threat?
Yeah, but we're not paying enough attention to what's happening to recognize that disconnection is that what actually causes disconnection.
Yeah.
Oh,
that works. It seems that 6s want others to share their, I don't want to use the word pessimism, but certainly their awareness of what might break.
Mm-hmm. And almost like validating their sense of it. It's because they don't trust themselves, they need external sources to say, oh yeah, this is a thing that we should be worrying about, to help them understand what is where I should put my attention.
I'd be curious, are 9s wanting others to share their own optimism, their own positive outlook?
I mean, you could do whatever you want, just so long as you don't bother me with it.
Yeah. There is a problem at hand with your daughter, and do you want her to be positive about the problem at hand?
I want her to be holistically embracing whatever is the current energy.
Okay, yeah.
If there's a problem that we need to fix, then let's fix the problem. If there's not a problem that we need to fix, then we shouldn't be focusing on problems.
That the latter is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We don't need to focus on this problem.
It's fine. It doesn't need to be fixed. It's fine.
Want your daughter to take a positive outlook here. The big one it's almost overwhelming is that 6s are earners and 9s are withdrawers, and this is how they are in the world.
Yep.
Have brought it up in the past, but I think I have only one set of names for this pairing. I can't find any couples of this sort except for one, and it's Rocky and Adrian, who are a fantastic, I think, embodiment of the 9/6 energy.
I don't disagree with you, but I also think that like that sort of speaks for itself, because if that movie was about Rocky and Adrian, it would be so boring. It would just be so boring.
What's it about?
It's about someone who is working to, like, it's much more about boxing than it is about
I see what
a
you're saying.
romance. You know, it's because there's 9s as withdrawers. We're not compelling in stories as leads. It just we're kind of boring, which is fine. We like it that way.
You need to go back and watch this movie. This is fantastic. That's the I find Rocky highly rewatchable and deeply compelling.
Yeah, but if it was just a rom-com, like if it was a
true
movie
enough.
that was
No.
supposed to be about their relationship, it would be really boring.
I mean, you should rewatch it. There's a lot of that. Here's one of the things, though, and this is perhaps where the movie gets its energy, is everybody in that movie tells Rocky how much his presence doesn't matter. It's like just wave after wave after wave after wave after wave, and then you have the quiet girl at the pet shop, and that dynamic is a lot of the energy gets a lot of the movie gets its energy from that element of of somebody's voice not being honored, their presence not being honored.
Sure.
And there it is, and she's the sister of a alcoholic brother, and they find refuge in each other. And that's it. That's the story, I suppose. We're just spelling out. Find refuge in each other. Anyway, in relationship, and you can speak to this much better than I. The 9, as we said, if you have healthy 6s in your life, and the 9 moves into 6 space, is agitated energy for a 9 always bad?
No. Sometimes it's so necessary. It's like, get off your butt and do the things that need to get done. And I'm not going to stop harping you about this because you're not doing it. And you said you would do it yesterday and you didn't. And like, there's a sleep to life factor to 9s that needs to be drawn out, and it needs to be drawn out sometimes by regular and consistent. Nagging is the wrong word, but only because it's offensive to some people. My wife constantly, like our entire relationship, she has been very concerned about being naggy. And I have to regularly tell her, 1, you've never approached naggy. 2, it would be better for both of us if you did.
Right?
Like, she just does not. She's so concerned about this, and really is like, I won't get stuff done if you don't remind me all the time, because I forget about it 8 seconds after you tell me to do it.
The stress move occurs, though, for the 9 when something is broken, I imagine, and your own agitated energy kicks into gear. Yeah?
Yeah.
That is, the problem is magnified. You are no, if things were calm, you wouldn't have moved into stress.
Right.
It's because something isn't calm that now it's the siren has begun to blare in some sense, and now you're experiencing the agitated energy. But you have a friend, you have a lover who lives in that space, who can speak to, okay, here's what you do with agitated energy.
Yep. And like, because that space, that stress move for 9s represents like it goes from like brain being shut off to brain being an overactive like wind-up toy. The 6 space comes along and says, okay, we should be active here, but here's how to be active. Like really, when nines move into that stressed place, the agitation, the anxiety, and the sort of lack of appropriate thinking get a little bit emphasized. And the 6 who lives there says, oh, let me show you how to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
Similar move again to what we just talked about with 8s and 5s. I mean, the 6 actually will invite the 9 to get their body moving, yeah?
Right. Right. It's not just freak out about the problem. It's let's make a list about the things that we need to do.
Yep. 6s can voice their concerns in worthy and legitimate ways, correct?
Yes.
And I imagine that this is something, as we said, where 9s are hiding their concerns. If something has authentically broken and they're in stress, that might be an invitation to really reveal some stuff.
Mm-hmm. And because the 6 lives there, the 6 can also not just validate, but it receive and accept and offer. Like I found that like several times over the course of our relationship, I hold back something that I'm sort of like progressively freaking out about for too long, and then I like hit that breaking point where I have to reveal like this is something that is bothering me. And Joni is there to say like I understand why this is freaking you out. Mm-hmm. I can see how this has become something that is overwhelming. Like there's a sense of in that space of the anxiety, that space where the 6 lives, there's an isolation and an almost terror of spinning in that chaos of everything's going to break. And when I move into 6 with my spouse who lives there, I am offered some comfort in saying that you're not alone, and it's okay to it is completely reasonable to be fearful, and it's going to be okay. Like she is able to offer me a sense of calm that I cannot manufacture because I've tried too hard to manufacture it and it hasn't worked. And now I've moved into stress, and she's actually able to say, yeah, stress is okay. And here's what we do now. Welcome. This is a safe place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What would this be? It's a very strange way to reestablish calm.
Mm-hmm. That
I've moved into a space where someone is used to really being aware of all the things that might break.
Right.
And just embracing that that's how life works sometimes. And,
right.
And in a strange way, you're like, okay, this makes me feel better.
Mm-hmm. Like almost like someone who lives at the eye of the storm.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh yeah, we're surrounded by everything is breaking constantly all the time. It's going to be all right.
Last thing, and this is a problem for some of us who are in relationships with 9s and with 4s, is that the stress move for 9s and 4s places them in spaces where they are moving out of withdrawn postures and moving towards being more earners. So 4s move to 2, become earners. 9s move to 6, become earners. It is incumbent on many of us not to take advantage of either 9s or 4s in stress. I think this is just worth noting as part of that stress move that just needs to get named.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything to say about having healthy people in 6 space. Maybe they say, look, don't let people take advantage of you in these spaces, you know?
Well, and I can only really speak for myself in this place, but if you are able to take advantage of me when I am in stress of that sort of earning posture, then you are doing it with full knowledge, because I won't let it happen without you knowing that I am deeply, deeply unhappy with what I am being required to, that I'm basically giving up and just doing what's expected of me. If I am far enough in stress that you can take advantage of me, you won't be able to do it without knowing exactly what you're doing. Because I usually have to go so far past the sort of panic and freak out and into this land of like vocally, aggressively just saying, I'll just do whatever you tell me. And I have no more engagement. Just tell me what to do.
I can imagine some aggressive types with power not caring at all, and pushing nines into those spaces.
Yeah. I have a few instances from our history that's not about you, but about people that we know that basically I had to say to them, I'll do whatever you tell me, but know that it's because I understand that you have taken all of my power now.
Yeah, right.
I'm not in charge of this anymore. So what do you want me to do?
Yeah. I don't know if what I'm pushing towards there, if you have a 6 in your life who already lives in that space and perhaps knows what it's like for folks to run them too hard, too far, take advantage of their energies, I would assume that would be, again, kind of one of those commiseration spaces.
Well, and also the 6 offers while they may not be able to demonstrate it, they can see it clearly enough to snap the 9 out of it.
Right.
To say, hey, you've gone too far into the unhealthy part of where I live, and you need to get your crap together.
Yeah.
Because now you're letting someone take advantage of you with full knowledge.
That's exactly what I'm pointing at. Yeah. And that's why that relationship on the line is really going to be valuable.
Yeah.
That's you're in that space. You need to rise to the high side and have knowledge of what's taking place.
Right. I have allowed resignation to join with my anxiety in a way that I basically let someone else decide how I live. And she comes alongside that and says, nope, wake up. It's not okay. Get out of this.
That's a great way to picture that. Good. I'm glad there was something. There was a nugget there. I knew there was a nugget there. I just had to keep digging. On the flip side, one of the reasons it seems to me that 6s can commonly be attracted to 9s is the peace that 9s are going to offer, the calm that 9s are going to offer really does counterbalance that anxiety. And so the agitated energy of the 6, when paired with an easygoing 9, that's going to be just a balm, yeah?
Yeah. And even because 9s don't ever want to do the work for someone else, but there's so much of a good relationship with a 6 that requires the other person, not necessarily a 9, but anyone in a partnership with a 6. A lot of what that partnership is going to be either doing the thinking for the 6 or working with the 6 to help them think for themselves appropriately. And so much of what takes place between me and my spouse has to do like a lot of our discussions are much more about her needing to get out all of the gunk and just needing someone to be present to it. I don't have to listen to a lot of what she says. I just have to be there while she's talking and then take the bits and pieces that are important and say, here's the ones that you needed.
Yep. I suppose this is where I want to avoid the word pulling into your security number because we use pulling to about idealists. But there's an invitation taking place for those in our security number. Like an invitation for me, moving from 1 to 7, it's an invitation into adventure perhaps, or an invitation to get going and mentally focusing on new things.
Right.
I assume for 6s, the invitation from 9s is come over here. The water is warm and calm and comfortable.
Yep.
We got Mai Tais and Bob Marley music over here.
Yeah. And you get to do whatever you want. It's great. Nobody gets to tell you what to do. It's awesome. You can do whatever you want over here. It's nice.
There it is. You're offering
No
autonomy.
rules. Oh, it's great.
No rules is about control. That's
Yeah.
a good one.
And yeah, sure, there are lots of rules, but some of them don't matter. And over here, it's just like, whatever. It's great.
Yeah. Something that 9s offer to 6s and 1s.
Yeah.
Like, I think you should set aside the rules for a second.
Yeah. Well, and
Withdraw.
so one of the things that my spouse and I regularly, this is a consistent, regular part of our relationship, is that she is very, very concerned about money to the point where it's problematic for her. And I am very unconcerned about money to the point where it's problematic for me. And so we come together and meet in this magical middle space where she's telling me all of the things that she's worried about. And I say, have you looked at our bank account? And she says, no. And I take out my phone and I just show her, like, is it okay for me to go to Target today? And I just show her our bank account. And sometimes it's a number that reflects that she shouldn't go to Target today. But usually it's just a really tangible way of me doing very little work to help her stop the thinking process. And just like, yep, we're fine. Stop worrying about it. It's over. And I didn't have to do anything. I just opened the bank account. And I think that like that dynamic of the way that she brings her stress, like her normalness out and reaches for that sort of security part of what I have to offer is really complementary, and in the same way, the ways that I stress out, she's already there to offer me some support and help me stand back up and get moving again.
Yeah, commonly, I think for thinking repressed numbers, 9s can be great allies because they step into that space of you're having a hard time getting your head around this. The voice of anxiety for 6s, the voice of self-criticism for 1s, et cetera. And 9s can commonly be an outstanding counterbalancing voice and informative voice here for the 6 of let me show you the facts that will not only meet your concerns, but actually soothe and calm your concerns. That would be the target. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, that strikes me as a great example of why this is a common pairing.
Yep.
Anything else on 9s and 6s in relationship?
Again, I'm speaking significantly from personal experience here, but I think there's also there's just a really important and significant facet here that 6s bring a certain amount of doing all the things that are necessary, that are expected, that are important, that like 6s want to make sure that they don't get in trouble, so they do all of the things that are quote unquote expected of them. And 9s forget their lives a lot, but they understand how to relax. And I think the way that this pairing sort of complements and contrasts each other in these ways, like there's such a good possibility of being really good for each other, because the 6 is going to help the 9 get the things done, and the 9 is going to help the 6 calm down a little bit. But also, there's a very real possibility here of them sort of like missing those marks with each other and almost shooting past each other. The 9s, in my experience, have a tremendous amount of patience, and that really helps partner with the 6s sort of continually struggling with the same sorts of thoughts.
Yeah, that's a good call.
But it also would become really easy for a 9 to start tuning out all of that stuff. In the same way, like it's great that like my partner takes care of so many things that I don't think about, but it's really easy for me to let go and just let her take
Right.
care of all of the important life stuff. And there's great things about how we complement each other. And if we let ourselves go, it would be very easy for us to let those complementary things become the only thing about our relationship. And now we're standing on opposite sides of a chasm.
Right. Yep.
So,
That's a good word. Last pairing here. We'll talk about ones and ones in their stress move go to 4. So the relationship between ones and 4s. This I don't think this pairing is as common, and we'll probably see why. But it is an important set of relationships, and since like we've talked about romance, but I have a 1-4 relationship, and it's with my brother, and he's a 4, and so I do understand this relationship in terms of just tight relationships in this sort of dynamic. Again, we're talking about thing with 1s and 4s. Both are idealists. They want to, engage and, bring beauty into the world. Often have idealistic ambitions, visions, fantasies. They both can experience anger in similar ways, kind of explosive ways, spilling ways. Both 1s and 4s are going to connect to other people as idealists do by pulling them into their cares. So 4s are withdrawn, but oftentimes 4s, if they're in a relationship, they actually are taking the lead.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. In a sense of like pulling the other person into the emotional depth of the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when 4s do connect with others, 4s often can have, for example, great relationships with 2s. And in a 2-4 relationship, it's often the 4 who's the one who's saying, "Hey, come over here." Or 4s, and I have good friends who are 4-6 couple, and the lead of the energy is very much the 4. I suppose both of those are reactive types. 2s and 6s are reactive types, but yeah, it seems like that can be a big part of it. 4s are setting the table a lot of times for what we're going to eat. If you're going to be in a relationship with me, it's going to be in these spaces.
Right.
I suppose lastly, both 1s and 4s can come across as self-righteous, and they can both come across as self-pitying at times, it seems to me. And just worth naming in terms of when in relationship, these are going to be some of the dynamics at play.
I do not disagree with that statement, and I really hope that 1s and 4s do not focus on that single sentence.
9 that you want just don't judge yourself too harsh.
That's not the only thing that we're saying. That is one of many things.
Self-pitying. So no. The complementary side, I think, are really interesting here. The idealism moves into the body with 1s. The idealism moves into the emotions with 4s. And a lot of the stuff that we see comes out of that. 1s are going to be very present focused, and 4s are going to be almost entirely past focused.
Right.
And that's going to be a big part of the dynamic here. 1s are going to be duty focused, and what is mine to do, and I engage the world through doing, whereas 4s are feeling focused and engaging the world through emotional. It seems to me that 1s, this isn't always a positive, but 1s are more consistent than 4s. 4s have an adaptability, a changeability that they can push into.
Yep.
There is the judgmentalism of a 1 that's different than that of a 4, which seems to be much more about comparison, especially how I compare with other people. I don't know. 1s don't necessarily, they judge, but it's not in a comparative way.
Well, and it's almost as if like a lot of these things that are contrasting between these two types. I think if you, especially 9 that I am, if you step back a little bit, you see that they're the same thing, just from opposite directions. And I think the judgment and the comparison are actually really good examples of that, because there's at the core of it, there's a level of how am I in relation to the people I see around me. And I think from the one side, it's needing to make sure that I am following the rules, doing what's expected. Like the judgmentalism is almost, I am above that. At least I'm not like that. And from the for perspective, it's from the other side looking in. It's why can't I? What's wrong with me that prevents me from being like them?
Yeah. I suppose for the one, the way that I would phrase that just differently is something like, I'm judging this thing as trash, and it's a good thing I can judge it as trash because I don't want it to get inside me.
Yeah.
That's where the judgment is coming out. And so
Yeah.
I'm going to avoid this thing that might be toxic.
Yep.
Whereas for fours, the comparative nature comes into play, and that's a relational comparison.
Right.
Not
Right.
necessarily always the case with ones.
Right.
There's a self-denying side to ones, almost a dutiful self-denial, whereas fours will elevate themselves. There is a preference for what is true coming from ones as almost foundational. Fours care about what's true, but there is a even more of a preference for what's unique. And I think those are different in terms of like the one grounding themselves on this is the truth, and that's where I'm putting all my chips.
Sure.
That's not where the four is putting all their chips. The
Right.
four is putting all their chips on this is special, needs to be identified as special.
Yeah. And again, I think that that's true. And also, I think that the one thinks there is an objective truth, and I am the one who sees the objective truth. And I think fours think there is no objective truth, and it is important that we all live into our individual subjective truth, representing and that manifests as one's leaning into this sense of duty to what is true, while the rest of us see ones and it's like, okay, but that's your truth, whatever. And fours have such a heavy emphasis on authenticity from your own perspective.
Exactly right. That may, in fact, be the biggest difference between these two. Is coming to the world, the one wants the clear perspective, the objective perspective. The four not only knows that the world is seen subjectively, but even desires it, wants to emphasize it, wants to triple down on how I see the world is valuable.
Yep.
And the one wants everybody to see, here are the facts, here's how things ought to be, etc.
Right.
That makes it, ones can end up focusing really heavily on social issues, how things are structured, etc. Whereas fours often, because of this, are going to be much more, here's the personal issues, here's the things that matter to me.
Right.
Any other comparisons?
Yeah, I think that realistically, I think all of it comes from if you can really dial in on the fact that they're both idealists, but one type sees the world a certain way and they think that their way of seeing is the only one, and the other type sees the world a certain way and they think that their way of seeing is the only one, but it's true for every that I think is one of the biggest things that these are exactly the same, but because of the way that they see it, it manifests so differently.
I could only think of one romantic couple. I could only think of one pairing just in general, but thankfully we actually spent a lot of time doing this pairing, so I can say it with a lot of confidence. The one romantic pairing I saw was Leia and Han, and it's going to illustrate a lot of this.
Yeah.
You'll notice, again, Han, she's a princess, and she has social justice on her mind, and yet he is pulling her into spaces where he is seeking to establish the lead, as it were. She is clearly a leader.
Yeah.
And still, when it's in the relationship, you can spell it, you can note how the dynamics work.
Right.
Am I wrong in saying it that way? It feels like so much of his energy colors the conversation they're having.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that the place where she sort of begins to dominate that particular aspect is a lot of the stuff that we never saw.
Yes, he's signed up to be part of the military, to be part of the rebellion. So she clearly has brought him there,
Right?
and yet when he gets his chance, we're getting on my ship, going over here, away from all of this action.
Yeah.
And now you're in my
even,
wheelhouse.
Yeah, so much of of their dynamic together, like specifically thinking about their relationship and not like the fact that they're actually fighting a war and all of the war aspects, like the relationship parts of their stuff. What we see on screen with them has so much to do with him trying to draw her out of her heavy focus on being a general and fighting this fight and move into this place of sort of emotional, relational connection.
Yeah.
That's what he's doing. And then the thing that they don't show, they just sort of acknowledge in a roundabout kind of way, is that at the end of the day, she had a sense of duty, and that became more important than his unwillingness to sort of like calm down.
Here it is.
Yeah. He had to be himself, and so he left. And she had a responsibility.
Yep.
So she stayed.
That is exactly how that works.
Yeah.
Their most famous interchange, I love you, I know, illustrates the point of this is a person who finally, for the first time, after 2 whole movies, is declaring her care and the self-elevation there of his own emotional experience and engagement of that fact is what's on his mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love that. One other thing that I think is hilarious, I hadn't thought of. Han shares Leia on the stress number, but he shares Chewie on the security number. We
Nice.
typed Chewie as a 2, so it's just him sitting
like
in that spot. So we'll talk about that at another point in time. But
And I think that's also a good example of like you could only think of one. I can't think of any actual pairings in real life, not just pop culture, of 1s and 4s. And I see in real life, I see a lot of 1s and 4s can have intense but also volatile relationships.
Yeah.
That like you have to lay a lot of groundwork over a lot of time in order for there to be something that these 2 types keep coming back for.
If you were to look at the Enneagram symbol, the traditional Enneagram symbol, the line between 8 and 5 mirrors the line between 1 and 4 in terms of the trajectory. And again, it's kind of the 8 and 1 pulling the 4 and the 5 into their bodies.
Yeah.
But the dynamics, I think, at work in those relationships, real similar on that front. It's not yin yang 1s and 4s because 1s are reactive types,
Right.
but you're entirely right. Like there's almost the idealism. 1s, 7s, and 4s when they're in relationships, you just can't live there easily sometimes.
Right.
That, there have to be ways of navigating out of that.
Yep. That idealism carries a lot of weight with these types.
Right. Yeah. It's so powerful that like you can see where things are going to break down. It's exactly as you were saying in this relationship. Her ideals for how the rebellion is going to go versus his ideals for how his emotional life, those will eventually come into conflict.
Right.
And that's why, and it's worth naming. The long lasting relationships, I imagine, and I can think of relationships with 1s and 7s as on this front as well. Like I think there's just more of a this is your space, this is my space, and we need to honor each other's. It's real love to honor each other's ideals along those spaces, I suppose.
Right.
Bang. Well, the move then ends up being ones are going to go to 4 in stress. And again, that list of the 4-ness can be incredibly healthy for ones, especially if they have 4s in their lives who are really, really healthy. And I know this just from personal experience, and I've said it a handful of times, but some of the real relationships I treasure are healthy 4s. I have a really difficult time with unhealthy 4s.
Yep.
Part of that's my judgmentalism. Part of that's my oneness that I'm averse. I can see unhealthy 4s and they like represent for me in my heart. That's like me at my worst self. Like,
Yeah, I think, and this is entirely about you and not necessarily a statement about ones, but I think that you particularly see unhealth in 4s more than you clearly see unhealth in any other type.
yeah. I also have I have a radar for what I can improve. And so if you have a radar for what you can improve, you also have a radar for what's really broken.
Yeah.
And I think and some of it comes out in that space. It's like, can we actually move you from here to there? Maybe not. I'm going to, it's that sort of thing. But also I don't like, this is actually, we brought up comedies with our recent deep dive into Clue. One of the reasons I think I don't like a lot of modern comedies, contemporary comedies, ends up being because so much of the humor is based on what would you call this? Like making you feel awkward.
Yeah.
There's a name.
Uncomfortable humor. It's I don't know what it's called, but yeah. The Office.
Yeah.
The thing about The Office.
I think The Office is hilarious. The Office makes me feel so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And like my wife just loves the hell out of it because of the that uncomfortable. And so same story with unhealthy 4s. It's like that same kind of reaction. But the move for me into subjective space and focusing on my feelings, incredibly helpful when things have broken.
Yeah.
If I'm in the world I find a lot of value in what I accomplish. When I'm unable to accomplish the things I want to accomplish, one of the best moves for me is to stop trying to accomplish things and to move into heart space.
Yeah.
To withdraw into heart space and to reassess, how do I feel about these sorts of things? To in fact elevate myself over the tasks and duties like forward.
And even to start seeing things in terms of relational connection as opposed to doing connection, which is a term that I've just now decided to coin for a part of how ones see the world, is that like their relationships are built by doing things together. And the exact opposite is where 4s live. Relationships are built by being relational together. And you don't have to do anything so long as you are connected. And I think that is one of the things that ones get in spades from that stress place at 4 is a clearer understanding that part of how they're relating to the world, it's an introspection, but it's also an ability to see the connectedness in a different kind of way that has less or nothing to do with what you're doing together.
Yeah, that's excellent. Another thing, I think 1s and 2s may share this, is that we end up giving so much of ourselves out without really thinking about, the fuel in our tank, as it were. We're not self-assessing. We're moving into those spaces to improve, to help, to earn what we desire. And that's not the best play a lot of times.
Right.
So much of what my 20s and 30s are me trying to help people or help improve people who don't necessarily need to be helped or improved, 1. And 2, I'm doing it at great cost to myself without thinking about, my own internal life and needs and et cetera.
Right.
And when that
Yeah, this is a solid example of the place where the idealism of the 1 and the idealism of the 4
Yeah.
can be complementary, or can at least help undo some of the damage that exists in that. Because I think that like so much of one's idealism and that desire, that need to improve, insists that I behave a certain way, and the opposite, I think, available at the 4 says it's actually more important for you to be true than to like live in this black and white world that you've constructed for yourself.
Yeah. To even go further than that, like the ideals the 1 have often are about, doing the thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
In stress, I'm going to meet that 4 voice that's going to say, you need to be idealistic about how you feel inside.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a great foundation.
Yeah.
And it's like, it can't be overstated how important that can be. What's interesting to me is in terms of like the voices of 4s who I care about, who love me, who are pouring into me, they can often come across when shoring up your feelings as woo-woo, as like out of the box, What we really need to do is step over here and smoke 5 cigars today and really delve into X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And that's not where I'm naturally going.
Right.
But if I do go there, occasionally I will be shocked at how refreshed I feel after the thing I had poo-pooed,
Yeah.
at the outset.
Yeah. Because for you, there are things to do to solve the problem.
Yes.
And when you get into that, when ones get into that stressed place, it's because there's not the thing that you did to solve the problem didn't work. And the 4 says, let's have some feelings about the problem.
Yes.
And that it's often the case that that's the thing that needs to be done.
And to express those emotions.
Right.
And to do so in healthy, productive, that's not even the right word. To express those emotions come what may.
Right. Yeah, it's the idealism of appropriately feeling and expressing the appropriate emotions is where ones live.
Yeah.
4s live in the idealism of feeling and expressing whatever emotions are true.
And sometimes the 1 needs to deal with the other emotions.
Yep.
One's
Who cares
wannabe.
about the appropriateness isn't getting the job done.
Yeah, exactly. This is especially true when it comes to what's happened in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And ones don't naturally have a road to the past unless they access it through their stress number.
Right.
So if you're going to deal with the past, you're going to do it through 4 space. And then the question is, are you doing it well or are you doing it really badly? There's lots of ways you fall into stress about what has happened in the past. This is partially where that inner critic lives, is actually, you screwed this up yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But the high side of 4, this is one of the things I truly value in my wife, is she also has access to thinking about the past and thankfully for me, can reframe the past in very successful, glowing terms that make me feel just fantastic about myself. But 4s, I imagine, the 1 going to 4 can also go to the high side and say, here's what's true, beautiful, worthy. Here's where everything has its place, even though it looked like it didn't go all that great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like the 1 in an unhealthy stress will see the ways that they didn't follow the script.
Yeah.
About how to handle these emotional situations or whatever, and the 4 will say, "Script? What's a script?"
Exactly right. Here is your unique past, and it has value.
Yep. Doesn't matter if it's perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's yours.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And that can be incredibly valuable. On the flip side, then, 4s being invited into 1 space in security, there's going to be an opposite move. Sometimes objectivity can actually be incredibly helpful
and necessary. Sometimes it's really, really important.
The placing a constraint, a necessary, worthy constraint on some of your emotions can be a really healthy move for some fours.
Yeah. I don't know why this just came into my mind, but I'm now right at this moment thinking a lot about compressors when it comes to sound.
Okay.
And part of how I learned what compressors are and what they're useful for is like it takes your lowest lows and your highest highs and just sort of, smushes them a little bit. And while fours who are listening to this go, what? Why would you want to do that? One of the things that it does is it doesn't overtax your sound system. Mm-hmm. When you have a speaker who is really good at the whispers and the quiets, but you need to be able to hear them. Like that dynamic is a problem because then people are turning up their headphones while they're listening, and then the regular sounding voice comes back on. It's like, it's too loud. And then when they get really loud and vocal and yell, then people have to turn down their speakers. And when it comes back to the sound, now you can't hear what's... You all know, I hope, that you all know what I'm talking about when I say that when there's too much dynamism, particularly in sound systems, it can be problematic. When there's too much dynamism in fours, in their emotional displays and understanding of themselves, I don't think it's bad to experience the fullness of emotion. But sometimes fours can miss out on good things in their life because they're more concerned about those high highs and low lows. And one of the things they can get from one is a compressor to help them, just cinch that up a little bit. And it makes everything a little bit easier and less likely to break.
Yeah, we've talked about it in the past. Moderation is a great good. And balance is really the target of the Enneagram. And for fours, everybody needs balance in different ways. For fours, that's clearly one of the places, yeah.
Right.
The most obvious move of ones inviting fours, dare I say forward, ends up being to become more present.
Yeah.
And to get into their bodies.
Yeah.
Fours can get stuck in the past. And because they're stuck in the past, they're not doing anything.
Right.
And accessing whatever that gear is of saying the past is really valuable. It absolutely has its place, but now we're going to set the past aside for a moment and move. That's a big time step. And that's what, action repression, getting past your action repression can look like.
Yeah, pick a thing and do it. And with ones, the part of the offering there is like when we talk about the idealism of a right way versus a wrong way, and fours who have an idealism of all the ways are equally valid. The part of what fours can get in that security move is it's okay to just pick one and say that it's sometimes okay to let there be a dualism, a narrowing of the field, if you will.
Right.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about this, but the image of equanimity for fours, that balancing, but for ones, it's going to be, holy order and that serenity that comes. Both of those can be experienced on this line if you can grab a hold of the tools available on this line. Right. Equanimity for fours and serenity for ones. It can come because you're engaging this element of your type. And by the way, I don't know that it's been said. We have kind of been casting it as you're a type and this other number is separate from you. But of course, that's not how things work. I don't know if we've mentioned this on air, but a real helpful image for me recently has been that you really are coming to the world as your type, but as you expand, as your personality grabs hold of things, you're made to kind of fill that space into your security number, your stress number, and into both of your wings. Mm-hmm. that actually is a holistic way of seeing your experience. Your type is your type. It's kind of it's the hub, it's the root, it's the thing from which everything else grows. But all those tools, all those experiences and, and virtues are available to you in these spaces.
We just have to figure out how to get to them.
Right. Yeah. And relationships can be a great way to gain access there. I suppose something worth naming as well is there's a temptation here, especially if you're in a romantic partnership with somebody on the lines, is to outsource some of these virtues to the other person.
Right.
So-
And that is very common. That's something that I do with Joni for sure, and she does with me for sure.
Yep.
And I see that a lot in the some of the 8 and 2 relationships that I see, and the 8 and 5s, and
Yep.
very common.
I think it's one thing to be a union, as it were, and to come forward as, we are perhaps in a romantic relationship, you are wed, the two become one kind of image. And so that can take place. But if the 8 is always running interference for the 5, allowing the 5 to lock down and stay withdrawn, that's not a good thing.
Right.
And so having real knowledge of where it's yours to grow in these spaces can be incredibly important. What's interesting, I think, with relationships on these fronts is each of us kind of have space even further. So the 9 can move into 3 space as well. The more the 6 moves into 9 space. Mm-hmm. There is space for us to expand, and it's not like now there's 2 9s in a relationship if the 6 gets really, really healthy on the 9 side, as it were.
Right. Yeah, there's interdependence is such an interesting thing because we desperately need. I desperately need my partner to help me fill in the gaps of the things that I'm bad at. And if I only let her, if all I do for the rest of my life is let her fill in those gaps, then I will become a less whole person. Mm-hmm. And so, like, a part of my work is to work on those things so that someday she doesn't have to fill in those gaps.
That's a good place to land the plane, I think.
Yeah.
Bang. Well, friends, it would mean the world to us if you share this episode with somebody you love, preferably somebody who you share a line with, maybe. This could be a great conversation point, it seems to me. We are going to hit the head triad and the heart triad in upcoming episodes, so we won't leave you hanging. And love the hell out of what we're doing this year. Not only is Start Here is doing great in terms of, like, we have a few hundred people who are typing through that podcast. So if you or somebody that you love needs to just get your head around your Enneagram type, we have a podcast called Start Here, and it's our tool for typing. Second, and the catalog is filling out, is our movie typing podcast. We have just released our first unique to that platform deep dive into one of TJ and I's favorite movies, the 1985 classic Clue. This is an ensemble film.
So much. Flames.
Love this movie so much. That's a good one. I just realized that in our we had a interview with Steve Morris, who I'm a huge fan of. He came on for our Fight Club deep dive, and he used the phrase over and over again. I would say, anyway, make a long story short, and he kept going, too late. He did it like 3 or 4 times because I was talking way too much, and now I'm laughing because I was like, oh, see, I missed that. That was a Clue reference.
I'm pretty sure I didn't miss that, but I wouldn't have said anything about it. Because I'm a 9.
Because, yeah. See the earlier portions of this podcast?
Yeah.
Intro music's by The Collection. Outro music here is by Brian Claxton. And if you love this podcast and want to engage it more, you can find us on Patreon if you want to support us. We always love contributions that help us get the tools that we need to make this move. But you can find all the links to all of our stuff at aroundthecircle.org, which includes links to us meeting monthly online. And we would love to have you if you're interested in talking shop with us once a month. So that's what I got. Did I forget anything there?
I don't think so.
He's TJ Wilson. He's officially awesome. I'm Jeff Cook. Who you aren't isn't interesting.